Right, could we have, good morning, everyone. Could we have a reverent hush? Good morning. Welcome to, would you believe, the 16th Heritage Day. So nice to see you all here. A few bits of housekeeping before we get things officially underway. There are no planned fire drills. If a fire alarm goes off, please exit, this is rather obvious, through the appointed fire exits. And in true naval fashion, I will be the last to leave. We have a full house today, which is marvelous. Thanks to the solidity of Christopher Wren's architecture, there is no Wi-Fi. And those of you like me who are customers of the wonderful people at O2 have no service either. So you may wish to borrow someone else's telephone. We are very, very grateful to the Old Royal Naval College for helping us to stage the event here. And as ever, we are always grateful, hugely grateful to the wonderful people at Ecclesiastical Insurance, our sponsors, who we will be hearing from later. And I hope sometime during the day today, those of you who haven't had a chance to look around the Old Royal Naval College and its associated buildings will take advantage of that, because this is one of the greatest historic sites, not just in England or the UK, but in Europe. And I often think that if people who lived in London knew what was on their doorstep, they'd come here in greater numbers. For example, if this were in France, they'd be racing over to look at it. So those of you who haven't had a chance to look around Greenwich, please take advantage of it today. Now, we are delighted and honored, and understanding the pressures on his diary, we are thrilled that Michael Ellis, the Heritage Minister, has been set free to speak to us this morning. And, well, without any further introduction, please welcome Michael Ellis.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Loyd, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here, not only for its own sake, but to not be in the House of Commons at the moment. But they have got me on a very tight leash. I could be called back at any moment. Nothing to do with Brexit. They want me to decide where to put the artwork, but no. No, in fact, there's an awful lot going on, but I wanted to make a particular effort to honour my commitment to come to this event, because as Minister for Heritage, I recognise just how important the work that you do is, and how important it is today to recognise that and this organisation. And I wanted to start by thanking Loyd, because Loyd's imminent departure as chairman of Heritage Alliance is something I just wanted to touch on at first. We have been, of course, extremely lucky to have Loyd since 2009. The passion and the dedication that he has brought to the role were reflected, I think, very well by the very fact that he was re-elected as chairman for a third time in 2015. That does not happen very often, and it's a reflection of his well-deserved recognition. So on behalf of Her Majesty's Government, and from myself and from all of us here, thank you for everything you have done for heritage. Round of applause. Now, my department and I are really excited to be working with Peter Ainsworth as well, the incoming chair of Heritage Alliance, in the future. And thank you again for hosting us today in what we know, of course, is a very important World Heritage Site, and a stunning reminder, if I may say so, of our maritime heritage. The Undercroft here is really a beautiful lesson in rejuvenating historic spaces, conserving them, yes, whilst also building for them a sustainable future. So further thanks must go to Heritage Alliance for their peerless work in organising this event and for the exceptional work that the Heritage Alliance does representing independent organisations throughout England. We are very fortunate indeed to have people like Loyd, Lizzie, the whole team performing such an exemplary service for our heritage and our sector. Now, 2018 has been quite a year, to say the least. It saw the 100th anniversary of the Representation of the People Act, 1918, which, as you know, ladies and gentlemen, saw some of the first women gain eligibility to vote. 2018 was also the final year of the centenary World War I commemorations, ending in November with events up and down the country, which were poignant and extremely well attended, from the cenotaph in Whitehall to local village war memorials. And it has been a very busy year for the heritage sector, with a number of changes and announcements affecting heritage. There have been, and there continue to be, challenges, of course. But there is much to be positive about as well. I think they just turned the lights up in case you were falling asleep already. But a key challenge, I think, which I know is a concern for the sector, is Brexit. Now, it would be remiss for me not to touch on this, because Brexit, again, it is a challenge, and I accept that. It presents significant challenges, but it also presents significant opportunities, not just for our sector, but for all sectors. And I'm aware of the heritage sector's concerns, particularly regarding future funding, international research, collaboration, access to skills and expertise. I'm very well aware of that, and I want to reassure you all today that we are taking account of the needs and interests of the heritage sector. It's not that other sectors have been talked about more and given more priority. The heritage sector is recognised for the importance that it is. In the negotiations to leave, we have taken into account as a government the needs and interests of the sector, and seeking to establish a new relationship with the European Union. Now, last year we launched, as you'll know, the first heritage statement. That set out our direction, our priorities for heritage in the years ahead. And it built on and it supported the commitments we made in the Culture White Paper in 2016, which I think was the first white paper on culture produced by any government in this country for about 40 years. The Heritage Statement last year was created to link things, to link government's vision for heritage to our wider agendas and strategies, from industry to the environment, from regeneration to conservation, and from investment in placemaking to investment in skills. The statement is one of ambition. It's ambition for and confidence in Britain. And nothing about that has changed. It is a statement that will help create a global outward-looking Britain. And I'm thrilled to be here today to update you on what has been achieved in that single year since the Heritage Statement came out, I think, December of last year. All of our achievements, if you like, are through an ever-strengthening partnership between government and the heritage sector. It's all about working together. And a key achievement has been, I think, the establishment of the Heritage Council, which I chair, and which is attended at ministerial level. We've had ministerial colleagues from other departments visit. And we had our inaugural meeting in May of this year, and we had our second meeting just last month. The aim of the Heritage Council is to enable collaboration and the exchange of ideas. It especially brings together DCMS with key government departments impacting the sector. That includes the Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, of course. It includes for the Department of Housing, not DCLG, what are they called? MHCLG. I have to keep up on the acronyms. And also the Treasury, of course. We mustn't forget the importance of the Treasury. Very important, easily the most important department, and just in case there's anybody here from the Treasury. And the point is that we work together, and we need to work together. And in my experience, it has been an extremely useful forum of the Council, the Heritage Council, for energetic discussion of those issues most pressing to us all. And this year has also seen great strides for the role of heritage in placemaking. I'm sure you're all delighted, ladies and gentlemen, as I was, with the commitment of £55 million in funding for heritage through what's being called the Future High Streets Fund that was announced by the Chancellor of the Exchequer in the budget in November, the autumn budget. That fund, the announcement of that, I think, very much recognises on the part of the government the importance of heritage, and it will allow for the restoration of historic high streets, which will be delivered through the expertise of Historic England and the Architectural Heritage Fund, with other sector partners. And we in government, and I know you in the heritage sector, see this as a major success, this 55 million, and it's something of which I'm very proud. The intertwining of culture, creativity, heritage, has been given a great boost since the launch of the Cultural Development Fund as well. I'm sure you'll agree. That was launched in June, and it's central to England's culture, our heritage. We recognise that, and it provides both an anchor and a bedrock from which to build. So I'm pleased to say that the £20 million made available as part of the Cultural Development Fund is fully integrated into the aims of the Heritage Statement, with two key heritage actors, Historic England and the Heritage Lottery Fund, being members of the advisory panel. And last year, we also announced exciting plans for Historic England to develop a new scheme, one to enable communities to identify, permanently mark, and celebrate the spots where history has been made, where the people, the places, the events that are important to them, the local communities. And I'm pleased to be able to announce the next stage of these plans. The scheme will engage the public in the significance of the historic places on our doorstep and the important things that happened there. It will provide a nationally representative, alternative way of marking more tangible and previously unrecognised histories across England, encouraging communities to celebrate and map the places that contribute to our national story in a genuinely diverse and inspiring way. Such enthusiasm for marking and celebrating local histories should be harnessed. It needs to be harnessed to provide a positive addition to plaque schemes across the country that most often celebrate the lives or achievements of individual people in history as opposed to events and places. Both are important. And looking forward, Historic England will look to run a live trial phase for this new scheme next year, with a competition launched to source a final design for the marker that will be used at each location. So that's an exciting project, I think, and one that will resonate, I feel, with the general public. I'm sure, like me, ladies and gentlemen, you'll be encouraged that this scheme will celebrate national history of local importance in collaboration with communities across the country. And I can picture now communities in counties far and wide, north, south, east and west, really engaging in this project. From the local context to the national, supported by our historic environment, Britain's cultural output is the most influential in the world as part of our world-leading soft power. And I'm really happy, it didn't surprise me, but it did make me very pleased to see Britain topping the world's soft power rankings once again. And I do credit our heritage sector with a very substantial reason for why it is we were ranked first in the world in soft power. And here in particular, I must give credit to a Heritage Alliance member, the World Monuments Fund. You have successfully brought the world to Britain's heritage through admirable schemes, just naming one, the Fund for Syrian Refugees. At the same time, of course, the UK continues to be rightly recognised for its exceptional world heritage. This year, I nominated the Jodrell Bank Observatory. The UK now has officially put forward that nomination, I think, for World Heritage status. And it will be considered by the committee next summer, potentially becoming our 32nd World Heritage Site. And the United Kingdom ratified the Hague Convention and acceded to its protocols in 2017. We take our international humanitarian law commitments seriously, and part and parcel of those commitments is, of course, to preserve and protect the most vulnerable cultural heritage across the world. And I'm really pleased to say that thanks to initiatives like the DCMS-sponsored Cultural Protection Fund, £30 million government money from my department going in that direction, we are now one of the world's leading lights in cultural protection. Whether it's preserving Yazidi heritage, for example, in Iraq, or helping rebuild Coptic heritage in Egypt, the fund has already contributed vastly to the UK's standing in the world in this field, and by extension, the UK's soft power in some of the most challenging conflict-affected parts of the Middle East. There's no doubt, I'm sure you'll agree with me, ladies and gentlemen, no doubt that our heritage is international. So I must also mention here the Heritage Alliance and the British Council's new travel grant scheme, which will offer travel grants to support UK heritage professionals to develop mutually beneficial international projects and partnerships for their organisations. And I would urge everyone here to look into this. Applications for that scheme will actually be opening from today, assuming, I think, O2 were working correctly. But have a look out for that. I also want to pay tribute to local planning authorities and of course volunteers in the heritage sector who play a central role in conserving and enhancing the historic environment. Their specialist advisors have valuable expert knowledge of their local areas and are best placed to know how to maximise the benefits of heritage in their local area and respond to the needs of local communities. And as we know, and as outlined in the government's Culture White Paper in March of 2016, Historic England is leading the development of new heritage apprenticeship standards, their promotion and their uptake across the sector. And we want young people of all ages, to be involved as apprentices, and so work in life towards the heritage goals that we all want to see achieved. And over the past 18 months, Historic England has convened 3 trailblazer working groups to develop new apprenticeship standards in archaeology, in conservation, and in historic environment advice. And through this scheme, Historic England are ensuring that new routes are available into the sector for the next generation. And I really commend this hard work and I'm very excited by it and want to see more young people getting involved. The Heritage Statement was comprehensive and many more advancements have been made to better protect and nourish the sector. Recently, my department published revised principles of selection for listed buildings to ensure those principles are fully, and those buildings are fully conserved and appreciated. Young people, the future, are being increasingly encouraged to enjoy the nation's rich heritage offer, with more than 700 heritage organisations having signed up to our hashtag #IWill campaign to encourage young people to get involved with heritage projects. And that's a really positive thing. And of course, the advent of augmented reality and virtual reality helps engage more young people. I could go on, but truthfully, 2018 has been and continues to be a great year for heritage. That is in no small part down to the work of everyone here, and I thank you all for that. We have put heritage, ladies and gentlemen, into the mainstream where redevelopment is concerned. We have reduced the number of at-risk heritage sites. We've better protected others. We've secured diverse and significant new investment to heritage projects, whether they be local or national. And I believe we can all continue delivering for a sector we cherish. And I hope that you will be heartened by the snapshot of all the progress we have heard today. There are, of course, always challenges, as I said earlier on, and there are challenges ahead. But as ever, the passion, the dedication of every one of you gives me, as Heritage Minister, great confidence that our challenges will be overcome. Protecting and championing our historic environment and our heritage is a noble calling. And you all play a vital role in that. You are heritage heroes. And thank you for all your work, for having me here, and for ensuring that our heritage is secured. Thank you very much.
Oh, good. Thank you very much indeed, Michael. I gather you're able to stay for a few questions before you're...
Yes, I'm not being called away just yet, so I think I can stay for one or two questions.
Fine, okay. Well, a few questions have been submitted, and I think we will start with one from the National Churches Trust. The government is committed to continuing the listed places of worship grant scheme, which provides VAT relief for listed churches on repairs and maintenance up until 2020. As it stands, this is the only dedicated financial support provided by government to help historic churches. What is the government doing to provide a similar level of financial support to churches after 2020, whether in VAT relief or in new repair or maintenance funding?
Well, thanks, Loyd. I'm going to stay here because these are the only microphones. I'm not mic'd up, so I'll just stay here. So the question there, listed places of worship scheme. I'm really aware that many places find the listed places of worship grant scheme really a very valuable resource, and I strongly support it. I'm really pleased that we were able to announce that we have extended the scheme until 2020, the present level of funding, that is, until March of 2020. We also had £95 million made available over recent times for this scheme. The roof repair fund, for example, and the First World War Centenary Cathedral Fund. So when you put those sort of monies together in terms of looking after our churches and places of worship, it's quite a large sum of money. But we need to do that because obviously places of worship account for a very large percentage of our listed buildings, for one thing. What I can say is that government remains committed to supporting historic places of worship, and I personally consider that a very important thing to continue to do.
Good, thank you very much. The Institute of Conservation asks, how can we fill skills gaps resulting from fewer UK trained conservators due to cuts to domestic conservation training courses and fewer EU conservators due to potential post-Brexit visa requirements? Where will we get conservators from after Brexit?
Well, I think I appreciate, as I said in my speech, about the uncertainty of Brexit at the moment. As you'll know, during the implementation period, the transition period that some people are calling it, people will be able to come and live and work in the UK as they do now. This is part of the overarching agreement that means that we have access to each other's markets unchanged, at least until the 31st of December of 2020. The government has been clear that we want to reach an ambitious mobility agreement. I mean, that's what we want to do with the EU. We want to support business, we want to support other organisations that provide services, we want to support tourism. I'm Tourism Minister as well as Heritage and Arts Minister, and it's very important that we do that because after all those things are pretty well connected. A lot of tourists come to this country to see our heritage sites. We want to allow EU and UK nationals to travel freely without a visa for tourism and temporary business activity. We have ambitions in that regard, and I touched on Historic England's trailblazer groups that are developing the apprenticeship standards as well to try and encourage young people to get involved in apprenticeships in archaeology, conservation, and so on, historic environment advice. So the government's going to be publishing a white paper soon. I'll just touch on that. I think Sajid Javid at the Home Office has talked about doing that soon. I would hope that that would be before Christmas, but I don't have an exact date. So we're alive to the issues and we're working on them. I think I may be able to do one more.
Can you do one more?
Yeah.
Which is an issue that is...
I want to give Giles a chance to answer a couple.
We will let Giles have his chance, I promise you. Something that has really affected this sector a great deal, reflected in a question from the Listed Property Owners Club. Can you shed any light on the Treasury's response to the Listed Property Owners Club petition calling on the government to reduce VAT to 5% on repairs and alterations to listed building, which reached the 10,000 signature milestone that triggers a government response?
Well, this is something that a number of people have raised with me, and I have considerable sympathy for. Issues of VAT, of course, and tax are a matter for the Treasury, and I think there has been a response from the Treasury. We've put representations to them. They're going to keep tax under constant review in this regard, and there is a commitment in the Heritage Statement about it. It's not a closed conversation. The issue of repairs to listed buildings is something that I've had several discussions, not least with the Historic Houses Association, and Ben, who's in the front row there, knows about that, and my own sympathies in the matter. What I would say in regards to that is we do need to be able to show the Treasury some robust evidence. It's about evidence. It's about being able to show them evidence of need, solutions, benefits. Because if we're going to ask them, if we're going to be successful in asking them to reduce the tax burden, that means a loss to the Treasury of income, and they'll want to know how that's going to be replaced. And we need to be able to give them the evidence for that. So I know, what I will say is I know that these issues, these matters are being explored by we've got a tax working group for the sector, and they are being explored, and I want that work to continue, and I'm doing what I can to to help those with particular representational interests in this area to access the right people at Treasury and elsewhere. And we'll keep a close eye on it.
Great.
Okay, Loyd?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
And thank you for taking the time.
Well done.
I'll see you soon. Yeah. Thanks, Michael. Giles, do you want to just, I'm quite keen to keep to the schedule, but let's have Giles answer a few questions. Yes?
Right, yeah, thank you.
And Giles, now, are you interim director of Heritage?
No longer.
Or are you director of interim Heritage?
I am Deputy Director for Heritage, Tourism and Cultural Diplomacy.
Congratulations.
The best job.
Marvellous, the best job in Whitehall.
Indeed. Yeah.
So, could we have, we'll take a few questions from the floor, please, to Giles. And when you ask your question, would you please identify, for the record, could you just identify yourself and your organisation?
I need at least one, otherwise this is going to be incredibly embarrassing. So, at least one question, preferably more.
Okay, yes. In the third row, in the fourth row. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Thank you. Judith Martin, Heritage Trust Network. I never need much encouragement to take to the microphone in these things. I'd like to continue with the VAT issue because I'm delighted to hear the stuff about the working parties and whatnot. I'm aware that it's the historic houses people who are making the real running, but I would like to say that actually the sector has evidence coming out of its ears. And since it isn't really tourism, perhaps, the historic houses will come under your tourist banner, but it certainly comes under heritage. The fact that there are swathes of terraced houses in the northeast in places that need huge input and encouragement, and they simply aren't on your radar, and they won't benefit from this 5% because they're not listed. It needs to be a blanket 5% for repairs and maintenance. And frankly, it could be better than revenue neutral if the volume house builders were taxed for the stuff they build on greenfield sites, or the very, very large blocks in London that are barely inhabited. So it could really be a winner all round, I think. So please, it needs to come under heritage, and you will certainly need a lot of diplomacy, but we are counting on you all.
Okay. The acoustics went great, so I didn't hear absolutely every word, but I think I got the gist of the comment and question. And I would just reiterate what you've heard from the Minister in that I think there's some very positive constructive work going on across the heritage sector, looking at the whole issue of tax and VAT, and you're shaking your head. Have I got the wrong end of the stick?
The acoustics are terrible, by the way. So you might, if you could stand up.
I'd like to know that you're looking at unlisted heritage as well. There's an awful lot.
Unlisted heritage?
Yes, it's
okay,
not only the big stuff, not only the historic houses, not only the churches, the ordinary, everyday fabric of 19th century and back a bit.
Yeah, okay, sorry, I didn't catch that at all. I think the short answer is that at the moment that is not an area of focus for us. As you're probably not surprised to hear. I think, of course, we are interested in having that discussion, but at the moment we are focusing on the listed agenda. So I can't really offer much positivity and comfort around that at this point, I'm afraid.
Another question, please. Yes. Racing, a microphone is racing towards you, unless you want to shout.
I don't mind shouting. I'm Roger King. I'm Heritage Manager for the Federation of British Historic Vehicle Clubs. My question is, would your department agree that vehicles form an important part of British history and culture, particularly over the 20th century, over the whole of the 20th century, and that the preservation of historic vehicles should therefore be encouraged, and that the limited use made of these vehicles should not be prevented or unduly restricted?
I would certainly wholeheartedly and warmly agree with the assertion that they are an important part of our national heritage and should be supported to that extent. So, yes, I'm very happy to confirm that from a DCMS perspective, and I'm sure Michael, if he was still here, and I believe he answered a similar question last year, or it might have been his predecessor. Yes, it's certainly an area of the sector that we fully support.
And shall we have one more? Could we have one more question? If not, I've got one on behalf of the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists. Brexit will shake up many policy areas. We are already working with DCMS staff and others to realise the full heritage potential of an agriculture bill. Other opportunities may exist, for example, to manage the historic marine environment more efficiently. To what extent should we see this legislative period as an opportunity to innovate and advance the heritage agenda, especially where EU membership has been cited as an impediment to potential improvements in the past?
So I think there's one sort of general point and a couple of specific points I'd make on that. We should absolutely look at it as an opportunity, and indeed we are. The general point is that, as ever, we, and that's the sector and DCMS, will need to ruthlessly prioritise in terms of where we see the big opportunities and risks are, and then focus our collective fire on those. And building on that, as ever, the evidence base underpinning those arguments needs to be as strong as possible. So in relation to the agriculture bill and the 25-year plan for the environment, which underpins it earlier this year, I think we've been collectively pretty successful in getting heritage reflected in those crucial documents, and we're working very closely with DEFRA, and the Heritage Council that we set up has helped Michael Ellis and officials do that, get traction on things like the ELMS schemes and so on. The Environment Bill was out for consultation, and we're expecting that to be published soon, quite a lot of things at the moment. So I'm not going to say too much on that because I'm waiting like everybody else to see what that says. But there is absolutely opportunity there, and we should proactively look to take it, subject to those caveats at the start.
Good. Giles, thank you very much.
Thanks. Can I make one quick point?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
One very brief moment. The Minister mentioned it's 1 year on from the Heritage Statement that we published last year. There is going to be a published document later this afternoon which summarises developments over the past 12 months. So I'd urge you to look at that on gov.uk and all good bookshops. So please have a look at that.
Excellent. Even more applause. Marvellous. Good. I had a dim feeling that in previous years we used to have a coffee break in the morning. Is that true, or is that just a fantasy that I've had? Right. Well, maybe I'm thinking that because the coffee was actually better than usual this year. Right. So here I am. Going to give my ninth and get out the handkerchiefs. My ninth and final chairman's statement to the Heritage Alliance and Heritage Day. Once again, I'm very grateful to all of you for turning out in such great numbers today, and it was really great that the Minister, in spite of everything, was able to join us. And Giles, please thank him once again for us. So, we've had a little bit of talk about the government, so I thought I would share with you, at discussions between DCMS and HM Treasury are carried on at the highest level in considerable secrecy. And I thought I would share with you a rare illustration of what one of those meetings looks like. Actually, I have to say that, thank you very much. I have to say that DCMS has really very, very gallantly and doggedly battled on behalf of this sector. It is historically one of the smallest departments, although it's got considerably bigger recently. And really dealing with much larger departments, DCMS has done a terrific job of trying to do the best for this sector. I know we often, like to have a go at them, but they have really been our champions, and we are grateful for the huge amount of work that they've done for us. And there has been very good news recently. I mean, the development of the Heritage Council is of enormous significance. I remember first discussing it with, it must have been with Jeremy Hunt when he was in opposition. So that was quite a long time ago. And there was great pushback from other government departments because they didn't want a cross-departmental agenda for heritage. But really, the Heritage Council has advanced that significantly, and it is a huge development for our sector. So we really have to work hard to make sure that successive ministers engage with the work of the Heritage Council and realize how important it is, because as we all know, our work in the heritage sector is affected by many, many departments, and it's terribly important to get heritage on the agenda of as many Whitehall departments as possible. We're also thrilled that we've made great progress in terms of getting heritage a significant place in the forthcoming agriculture bill. And of course, it is extremely good news that this £55 million has been allocated to the historic High Streets project, which I think will have great benefit for the country. One of the issues that we've had with DCMS over recent years has been, though, the extraordinary turnover of ministers. Reminds me slightly of my high school yearbook. But, you know, really, I mean, in the time that I have been in this job, this has been the number of secretaries of state and ministers that we've had to deal with. And it reflects the political turbulence of our times, but it does make it rather difficult. So we welcome any measure of stability that comes from DCMS. We have been very fortunate that there has been a significant amount of stability in terms of the civil servants at DCMS. And I recognize what a great job they've done in providing policy continuity. And in fact, I think it is fair to say that over the last 2 years, we can really claim to have a very solid partnership with DCMS. You know, Heritage Alliance, for those of you who haven't been involved with it for a very long time, Heritage Alliance, its ancestor, Heritage Link, was created because DCMS and the sector itself felt that we were very fragmented. There were a multitude of organizations that needed a single voice. And really, over the last couple of years in particular, Heritage Alliance has become that single voice, and I think we've made a very valuable contribution in terms of feeding policy and practice advice into DCMS. And we really genuinely have a partnership for which I'm very grateful. I thought I would slightly wind back the clock and have a look at some of the exciting events of 2009. Or was it 2000? Yes, it was 2009. 2009 when I became the chairman of this wonderful organization. Major cultural figures appeared on the scene for the first time. The Black Eyed Peas and Lady Gaga. And predicting many future concerns, the chief executive of Google had the following prescient quote: "If you have something you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place." So cybersecurity began to rear its head. And also with amazing sort of foresight and sensitivity, Hugo Chavez announced that Venezuela was indeed going to experience a recession. Also, here we were, Heritage Link. And I was greatly honored and privileged to be asked to succeed Anthea Case as chair. And I must say that in the very early days of the organization, it was Kate Pugh and Anthea who laid the foundations that have enabled us to become the strong voice that we currently are. Had they not nursed this very fragile infant, we would not be the strong organization we are now, speaking up for the sector. Now, one of the first things that happened when I became chair was a name change, because I just didn't understand what Heritage Link, I genuinely didn't understand what Heritage Link meant. So we became the Heritage Alliance. Possibly the name will change again in the future. I'm not really sure, but it served us very well. Over the years, the organization has grown hugely in many ways. We've grown from 76 member organizations to over 130. And one of the things that we have consistently promoted, and I think it was, it refers slightly to one of the questions that was asked to Giles previously. One of the things we've consistently promoted is the fact that heritage is not just about the built environment. Heritage is about the natural landscape, it's about transport, it's about industrial archaeology, it's about intangible heritage, the way we do things. Heritage is a very, very broad church and a very complicated ecology, and all of the aspects of heritage feed into one another. And we have been particularly delighted to welcome, for example, more transport organizations into this body. So the recognition of heritage as a broad church is very significant for us. We have seen the split between English heritage and historic England, which is partially to do with a general retreat of the state from various areas. We have made a lot of great achievements, I think. You know, Heritage Open Days has been enormously successful and a real partnership. The Cultural Heritage Counts for Europe project, which we launched with Europa Nostra, was very significant indeed. We had projects like Discovering Places, and Giving to Heritage was a phenomenal capacity building program, which I hope many of you have benefited from. And we know that it generated at least an additional £3 million in funding for the sector, because one of the things, of course, we have to get better at is raising money. You know, we must get better at getting money, not just from trusts and foundations, but from individual members of the public, and not just the super rich. I think one of the most important shifts in attitude, which we have been banging on about for the last 9 years, is getting government and others to realize that whilst heritage may cost money, it is not a liability, it is an asset. And it's something we must never forget. Heritage is an asset. Difference has value. Antiquity has value. Heritage is what defines us as a nation. It is our unique calling card to the world, and it will help to ensure our future success as a nation. We're still faced with many of the same challenges that I think I've talked about sort of over the last 5, 6, or 7 years. So, for example, we live in a highly unstable world. That's actually a rather optimistic view of him. You know, but everywhere we look, there's enormous political, geopolitical instability, and that, of course, both means that the demand for heritage is greater than ever, because heritage is something for us to hold on to at a time when everything else is changing. But it does make political life very difficult. The other challenge we face is the continuing rising cost of the NHS and social care, which, coupled with the need for more money for security and defense, for example, means that this will forever be a snapshot of government funding of heritage. I mean, that is just the reality that we have to live with. That is not going to change. And whilst we recognize the continuing need for house building all over the country, rampant development, disregard for recycling of the historic environment is something that threatens the heritage wherever we look. So we do need to turn to the public. We need to get much better at asking for money. It's an extraordinarily competitive fundraising atmosphere out there, and we need to be heard in a very, very, very crowded marketplace. So, once again, can we please not be too English? And actually be proud of what we're doing and tell people about it. I saw a wonderful remark from the head of one of the animal charities who said, and I advise you all to bear this in mind, he said it's really very simple. Just do good things, tell people about it, and ask them for money. So please remember that mantra. We face the same old problems and many new problems, and most of those problems are not going to go away. But no matter what problems come down the road, we are much more able to face them, because I think we are a stronger sector. We're a much more resourceful sector. And, one of the reasons we are is just because look around you and see what sort of country we live in and what amazing contribution heritage has made to it. And that's why one of the great joys of working in, living with this often problematical sector is the fact that generally we're really optimistic about things. So, compared to many other aspects of life, this is my sort of view of what the heritage sector looks like. Whatever is thrown to us and whatever has been thrown at us over the past years, we have faced the challenge and we flourish and we do a better job every year. This is one of the only sectors, culturally and economically, this is one of the only sectors that consistently does a better job every year. Engaging more people, saving more, educating more, inspiring more, and we will continue to do that. So it is the most enormous source of pride for me that I have been your chairman for 9 years. I have to say, I was really extraordinarily disappointed, even hurt, when my fellow trustees heard that I was retiring, and this is how they reacted. I mean, that really was a very bad moment. I am delighted, however, to be handing over an organization in robust health. I am thrilled that I have not only had a marvelous predecessor, because as a chairman, one of the most important things is to have someone great before you, but even better is to know that I have an outstanding successor. And later on today, you'll hear from him, but I am thrilled and delighted that your next chairman, subject to election at the AGM, that your next chairman will be Peter Ainsworth, and I am so happy to be handing over to him, wish him well for the future, and the future for our sector, whatever happens, the future of our sector is great, thanks to you, and thanks to the way we've engaged the public. Thank you all very much indeed. And now, thank you. And thank you. Thank you. Gosh, I have to say, it wasn't like that the last time I played at Glastonbury. And now I am really happy to introduce the new Director General of the National Trust. Well known to many of you because, I mean, you've been there for 13 years. Gosh, Hilary McGrady, please welcome her.
Good morning. Oh my God, how do I follow that? How do I follow that? there's going to be lots of speeches, Loyd, but I think I speak for everyone in the room. Am I talking back to you? You've just been an inspirational leader for this organisation, but for Heritage in the round, and I think you deserve that applause, I have to say. So on my behalf, thank you very much. So, good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be here as the Director General of the National Trust, and it's almost a year to the day, it'll be 2 days' time, when it was announced that I was going to be the new Director General, and there was probably nobody more surprised than me in the room. I have been with the Trust for 13 years, and I'm not sure that I ever sort of thought that the Director General job was going to be one that I could ever aspire to. But by the time I got to go in for the job, it was one of those ones that I thought, well, if I don't give this a go, I will never, ever forgive myself, because who would not want the best job in the world? And I have the best job in the world. I remind myself every morning I get up that I've got the best, I think, best job in the world. And nearly 1 year on, although I only took up the role in March, it still feels like that, genuinely. There are days that are a bit more tricky, but on the whole, to be able to lead an organisation that genuinely goes to the heart of everything that's important to me, beauty, the environment, heritage, culture, those are things that have been the pillars of what's been important to me since I was a child. And so today I'm really pleased to be able to talk to you. I was set the exam question that Lizzie set me was, in this new job as Director General, what will the nation's heritage want from the National Trust in the 21st century? And that was it was a timely question, actually, because 1 year on I've been thinking a lot about where I want to take the organisation. So I was going to do two things. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my own personal perspective of why heritage matters, and then obviously why that then is going to bleed in to where I want to take the Trust in the future. Now, the clicker's disappeared. Oh, there we are. So this is probably a career-limiting way to start, at a heritage gathering with a beautiful heritage building in flames. But I wanted to start with a story. So you'll have figured out I'm from Northern Ireland. I still live in Northern Ireland. And this building, some of you might know it, is the bank buildings in Royal Avenue in the centre of Belfast. It would be the equivalent of one of the main buildings in Oxford Street. It was a Primark building, but this building was built originally in the early 1800s. And you might be forgiven to thinking that this was sometime during the Troubles, but in fact it was only about 6 months ago. And it went on fire. As you can figure out, it was an electrical fault, one of those. But the reason I wanted to talk about it was because I went to see this building about a week after the fire had happened. And I kid you not, there was about 100 people standing all around the cordon. Quite a lot of them in tears. A sense of outpouring, a sense of genuine grief that this building that was loved by everybody was left in such a place. And for me, it was a real moment that said, this building, and you can be sure that if this was a modern building that had burnt down, you wouldn't have had those people there. The sense of attachment, the sense of value attached to a building that meant so much to so many people, whether they went shopping there, whether they just knew the history of that building or their parents had worked there, for whatever reason, people were genuinely moved. And all the logic said, because it was really badly damaged, as you can see, all the logic said that it should be destroyed. And there was a huge force to do that, because it was coming up to the Christmas trading, all of these things. And the sheer force of passion for this heritage building has meant that thankfully, the local authority, Belfast City Council, have said they will retain at least the facade, and they're going to restore it. But it was a moment for me which just talked to the value and the importance of heritage and the sense of place. And I questioned myself, thinking, and would this have happened 15, 20 years ago in Northern Ireland? And I wondered about that because, as I said, I was born in Northern Ireland, educated in Northern Ireland, and all the way through culture, heritage, sense of identity, it's been such a divisive thing in Northern Ireland all of that time. And yet, right from the get-go, and possibly through my parents, for me, culture was always a thing to bring people together, not to divide them. And heritage in particular, places that brought people together as opposed to dividing them, was a really important thing. And despite the terrorists trying their best to bomb the life out of Northern Ireland, these buildings survived. And they've survived because people loved them, and people now do anchor themselves to them. And it was one of the reasons why, and it was potentially quite foolish at the time, I came out of a job, I was in marketing at the time, working for the drinks industry. The job of interim chief executive for Capital of Culture bid at the time came up. Everyone knew that Belfast hadn't a mission of winning it. But a lot of us, and I was certainly passionate, believed that culture had such a catalytic potential to make a difference that I took up the job to lead that team, because I believed that the investment and at least the belief that culture could do something would be a good thing long term. And it was. This is Belfast City Hall celebrating Pride. Now, who would have thought that Belfast City Council could ever bring themselves to do this? And Lonely Planet last year said that Belfast was one of the most culturally vibrant cities in Europe. And I still to this day believe that my little contribution back then, in the belief that culture, heritage, all of the things that matter, would leave a legacy, and it has. And since then, millions and millions have been invested in the cultural landscape in Belfast. And so, for me, heritage is not about, while there's an inherent value, of course there is, actually, what gets me out of bed is because people love places. So my job in the National Trust is about getting more people to love more places. And I'm going to be slightly controversial and disagree actually with whoever was the animal charity. It's not just about doing good things, telling good stories and asking for money. That won't work. You have to do good things and engage people in what you do, get them to love the thing that you're doing, and then they'll give you money. You almost don't need to ask. So my job is about making more people love places, and they'll only love places if they feel value and benefit from them. So public benefit will always be front and centre for what I want to achieve in the Trust. And that is not any different to what our founders also set out to do. Our first purchase was Alfriston Clergy House, an inherently important building, of course, needing preserved, and it was in a terrible state at the time, and they had no money. Our founders had no money to be able to do this. They had passion and belief that it was important. But they didn't just do it, they didn't just restore it because of itself. They restored it because they believed, and Octavia Hill in particular believed, that everybody deserved access to beauty. Everybody deserved to understand their heritage, to understand and feel part and feel rooted in it. And so that was the basis on which she started, and we've been building ever since. So I'm standing on the shoulders of many, many giants before me. And over the years, we've actively tried to ensure that the heritage that we've been looking after is representative and relevant to a much wider base. The stories, the social history, the inherent value of heritage is what the Trust has tried to do more about, but every time coming back to, and what is it about this place that matters to people? And I think it was this woman, and many of you will know her, my mentor, Fiona Reynolds. She, I think, was the Director General who said, we have done an amazing job at looking after places, but we really need as an organisation to open our arms. To be an arms-open organisation that people feel that they can be part of what we do. And she really set us on that, and I think when Fiona joined, we had less than 2 million members. And we now have 5.3 million members, which is an extraordinary growth and an indicator of just the level of interest in what we do and what you do. And I'm going to come back to that point in a moment. So again, I stand on her shoulders, and equally Helen Ghosh before me also said, we're doing a good job, we've got all of these members, but there's still many, many, many people out there who don't feel that what we do is relevant. And she really prompted us to think more about diverse audiences. So I will continue, and I'm absolutely passionate about people being at the heart of what we do and finding ways to engage more people out there, but not just about membership, Membership, important as they are to me, that's only a tiny part of the story. If the nation doesn't feel that heritage is important and that the nation loves heritage, frankly, our heritage isn't going to survive. So what does that mean? If I go back to the exam question, which what does a National Trust need to think about in the 21st century? What are the problems that we have to solve? Well, quite a few of them have been talked about already this morning, and I'm not going to repeat those. But just food for thought. The first thing actually is we've got to keep looking after what we've already got. It's so tempting to jump onto the new things all of the time, when in fact, just looking after the amazing buildings that we have costs a lot of money, takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. Last year, we spent 180 million on just looking after our existing portfolio. This is Blickling, but I could show you many, many photographs of the projects that we've been working our way through. And this happens to be one of our big treasure houses, but equally we spent nearly 15 million on our lead estate, residential lead estate last year. We've done a lot of work to figure out our backlog, just looking after backlog, and that's going to continue as a exercise going forward. 2/3 of our overall expenditure will go on this kind of work, so we'll have to continue to maintain what we've got. But I'm really conscious, and I think I'm more and more interested in this, if we continue to only look after the amazing oasis of beauty that we own, we will have done a disservice to the nation that our founders asked us to think about. When Fiona said that you're here to promote the preservation of special places, she didn't say, and it's only the special ones, and it's only for members. She said the nation needs to engage. And we know, and despite all the lovely things that the Minister said, and we are getting better at this, and I don't want to downplay that, it would be foolish to think that our heritage is not still in trouble. High Street heritage in particular, and I call it everyday heritage. It's the stuff that makes places that needs our support and our love. And the Trust has a role to play in this. And we're working our way through that, and I'll come back to it in a moment. But this is the sort of heritage that matter to people. Of course, we've got all sorts of other wider challenges ahead of us. Climate change will impact on all of us. This is a fairly extreme example given as Lindisfarne right on the edge of the sea, but actually almost everything that we do will be impacted and changes in climate change. Our environment is changing around us and we have to adapt to that, and there's a cost and an effort to it, but we have to be able to respond. But I think the single biggest thing that's changing, that certainly in my world I'm seeing every day, is actually the wider public and their response to not just us, but to everything. Expectations have risen. Their belief in their need for voice has risen. Social media has changed the landscape entirely. To do something and hand it over is not really how it's going to work anymore. The public want to be part of, they want to be involved in, they want to participate and be in the middle of what we're doing. And that presents lots of challenges for you and I. I think it's an exciting challenge. I think it's really challenging. You'll have seen some of the press coverage that, the Trust has had for, certainly for 2 years and more recently. But my goodness, if we don't face into that, we're going to get left behind. So focusing on people is the right start, but actually really moving it to not just about what we give to people, but being part of a society that wants to be part of what we do is a big gig. And then, for me, one of my big challenges, and I'm increasingly discovering as Director General, a lot of my life is about trying to walk a line. So while I want to move forward and I want to be people-focused and I want to be, reach more diverse audiences, I also need to bring with me all the core support that I have out there. Our members, 5.3 million of them, are the lifeblood of my financial model, and I'll defend it to the death. These people are really, really important to me, and how do I bring them with me while trying new things? And that is increasingly a challenge. So the Trust, in terms of some of the solutions, we're looking at all sorts of different things. I really passionately believe we are not an organisation that holds places in aspect. We're an organisation that needs to be to provoke new thinking. We're an organisation that needs to use our heritage to help people think about How is that now relevant in my life going forward? And increasingly we'll be doing more. This is an artistic commission. And again, it was Blickling in a response to, if you've never been to Blickling, their library is extraordinary and very important. And this was a commission to an arts organisation to say, what is the written word? How does the written word impact on society today? And this was called The Word Defiant, and it's an installation that goes throughout the whole property. Being really honest, I got quite a lot of complaints, but I also got a huge amount of response that said this was really helpful. It really made me think differently about the importance of libraries, the importance of the written word, why it's so important to protect it. So we'll be doing more of this, but I need to keep an eye on making sure that people are not so disorientated about why is the National Trust doing this kind of thing. Some of the mitigation of that will be an equal and probably growing, in fact definitely growing, focus on standards of conservation. Real investment, 20% increase in investing in our good formal standards of conservation. Collection management, research, all the things that will help people feel National Trust is still secure, still looking after the things that are important to me. Partnerships will increasingly be a part of how we do business. So the Heritage Open Days that the Trust facilitates, I think, is one of the most extraordinary democratisation of heritage. Most successful thing that I think we have been involved with and I can see grow. I want to be able to do more with it, and I don't even know where it could go, but I think it has, 2.5 million visits last year to everyday heritage and less every day. But an extraordinary achievement and a sense of what matters to the public. And this is the Roundhouse in Birmingham. Again, the National Trust moving out of what people would perceive us to normally do. We're now in partnership with the Canals River Trust on this project. They own the building, but we've now taken a long lease with them. Part of the thinking was to act as a hub for Birmingham so that we could start to almost curate the city. So a starting point, a trailhead for people to engage with the waterways, but also the heritage of Birmingham. A really exciting project for us. Again, very different territory for us to work so closely in partnership, and there's many other people involved. HLF supported us on this and many other organisations. So challenging, but really, really important. So in closing, I think the Trust needs to move with the world. It's an incredibly important organisation, a national treasure that people love, people want to hold on to. And someone mentioned earlier, when we've got a world of real challenge in the coming years post-Brexit, where chaos is going to be around us, actually places like the National Trust give a sense of rootedness. And actually over the years, when there's been a recession, actually the Trust has always done very well because people go back to what they feel secure with. So I feel hugely positive and ambitious about that. I think it'll be challenging, but I think it's a real opportunity for us. But we will need to change, we will need to continue to move, and we will need, probably more than anything, to respond to this sense of a public that want individual engagement, participation in what we do. And how we as an organisation that's prided itself so much on expertise and knowledge, how we can feel confident to cede that over, to keep the standards but get people engaged. That's a really tricky thing, and I don't have all the answers that if anybody does on a postcard to me, please, but I think it's going to be a progressive, iterative thing that we'll have to work through together, and that's my final point. This is a together thing. The Trust has for a very long time, and we're a big old organisation, we've got resource, I'm very conscious of that, but I'm really clear that if we want to engage the nation, and that's what I'm interested in, I'll need to hold hands with every other organisation out there. And we have had a great relationship with you, but I want those relationships to be strengthened. I want to find ways to work with other people so that our critical mass, our momentum can build and build, and we want to be a real part of that. Thank you.
Hilary, thank you so much, and I think you have time for a few questions from the
floor.
audience. So, who has a question? Yes. Do you want to shout or do you want to wait for the mic? Good. It's a very important attribute in this sector.
There was just on the topic that you just raised about the building being rebuilt after the fire, and it was important to re-establish that. What's your view of the burned down McIntosh building in Glasgow now? Whether you think that should be rebuilt as a McIntosh building as part of our kind of sentimental heritage, or does that not match it should be a modern building? Is that something that you...
Is a personal view? Yeah, a personal view. No, I think it should be restored as a historic building. I think it should. I think it's such an iconic building in its landscape, and it's tragic actually what's happened to it. But that's my personal view. There'll be all sorts of arguments for and against it, and if nothing else, I'm a pragmatist actually as well, because sometimes you just have to face into some of these really hard decisions. I'm facing it myself with Clandon. And so you have to balance these things. I'm not such a dreamy head that you have to be realistic. And that Primark building, I think I would love the whole building to have been restored, but they're going to keep the facade. I think that's a good, sensible response to it. So there's a level of pragmatism. My personal view is yes, it should be restored. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Yes, please. Oh, the microphone is just behind you.
Marilyn Palmer, I've served on quite a number of National Trust committees. While I think a lot of the public are very, very keen on the move towards 365 opening, how are you going to reconcile the increased footfall with conservation standards in the properties? Yep.
So the slide I said about conservation, I'll start with the lifeblood of the trust is about public access, about public benefit. So that will always trump. Public benefit will trump, but we can do that without compromising on conservation. And one of the things that we've put a huge amount of time and effort into and will continue is investing. How do you do that well? And we've made some mistakes, we definitely have. But each time we do that, we learn a bit more. I have to say, as regional director in London South East, I was the one that said everybody 365. Didn't go down brilliantly at the time, but it made a real difference. And actually, we have found ways to be able to resolve this. But what I'm really clear about is that there are just sometimes that there are too many visitors. And we need to be brave enough. So you can't, one size fits all doesn't work in a heritage organisation. So some properties need to limit the number of visitors, and other properties, honestly, there's a lot of scope to be able to do a lot more. So, but you do have to be bullish about that. I have to say. I think I will keep pushing on that, but there's no reason why we can't do both.
Another, please. Oh yes, just sort of by the halfway down. John.
Hello,
Goodall.
John Goodall, Country Life. Hilary, can I ask, do you have any particular plans to engage with council-owned houses on the edges of cities? I mean, it does strike me one of the dilemmas that you identify is that the National Trust ideal is a kind of rural beauty, and we all know, and that comes with its own challenges, but a lot of the action at present is in urban centres, as in the High Street. But one of the groups of houses that always gets left out are those that have that relationship with cities, that are owned by town councils, and they are in freefall and in crisis, places like Heaton. It is something the National Trust really can help with, getting people to these places. Do you have formal plans to start engaging with councils to deal with those properties?
Yes, well, I certainly would say I have a specific interest in heritage in urban areas. Whether it's big houses in urban areas, I'm more kind of interested in all sorts of different types of heritage. What I'm interested in mostly is the heritage that people are interested in. So I'm going to start with what the places that are important to people and work out from there. But I think we've already been active. So I mentioned the Roundhouse. We're working with Moseley Road Baths, which is a Victorian, Grade 2 listed Victorian baths, also in Birmingham. The Spode Ceramics Museum. We're working with lots of different groups on urban heritage, but not necessarily in our standard, move in and buy it model. We think there'll be a mix of different ways that we can support different types of heritage, whether that's local authority or actually interest groups. We're working a lot with small charitable trusts, those types of things. But without a doubt, we will be more active in that area, and I'm actively looking at that at the moment.
And we have time for one more question.
No more questions. Oh.
Yes, there. I see a red sleeve.
Hilary, thank you very much for such an inspiring address. I'm from the Old Royal Naval College, and I just wonder if you might say a few words about, you indicated in your, if you like, your outlook that environmental considerations was something that you could see looming large on the horizon. How is the Trust preparing for that, or building the capability or the partnerships to address that?
Yeah, it's definitely very big in our minds at the moment. Clearly, post-Brexit, we're preparing a lot around what the impacts of the new agriculture bill, the environment bill, and I think, to be fair, I think DCMS have been incredibly good at making sure that heritage has been woven into those. So there's one big strand of work which is all about environmental impacts and what we as an organisation can do. I think the day and daily changes in our environment and how that's impacting on us is a work in progress, if I'm being honest, but we've got teams of very great experts within the organisation that are looking at those things. Everything from some of the pests that are in our buildings as to why they're able to thrive in warmer climates, through to things like storms and how we're protecting our buildings. Even things like infrastructure, visitor infrastructure, where you've got longer, wetter winters. We're having to put a huge investment into our car parks, all of those things. So it's multi-layered, and I don't think there is one sort of silver bullet to solve it.
Just a quick question about that, transport and infrastructure. Historically, the growth of the National Trust was very much related to encouraging people to get in their cars and tour the country and visit sites. And of course, that's kind of contrary to what we want to do now in terms of sustainability. So what is your transport policy shaping up to be?
And I always get challenged on this. And again, I'm a pragmatist. At the minute, the majority still will come in their cars. So we're doing all sorts of things. So we are, for example, putting in more electric recharging points into our car parks. We're certainly trying to work with local transport authorities to increase the level of public transport availability. But our places are in rural areas. It's really difficult. Probably our most successful initiatives have been around working with Sustrans to try to get cycle paths going through our properties. More and more we'll be doing outside activities like cycle trails, walking trails, those types of things that are encouraging people to find their own modes of transport. It's not going to be solved overnight, let's be honest about that. But we're playing our part to try to solve it for the longer term.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks. Thank you. Right, now, Heritage Counts is extraordinarily important for our sector because it has all of our vital statistics. It's the best single compendium of information and research. And so it's a major part of today's events that we have Duncan Wilson, who's Chief Executive of Historic England, who is going to formally launch Heritage Counts 2018. Duncan.
Thank you, Loyd, and thank you for the opportunity to speak in the Queen Mary Undercroft, which is a place with which I have some connection since I was here at the Old Royal Naval College when it was refurbished. It makes me all the more eager to see the even more ambitious refurbishment of the King William Undercroft and the Painted Hall open very shortly. And congratulations to Angela, Will Palin and the team for getting the project thus far. I think this place actually illustrates the challenges of heritage perfectly, especially heritage in which lots of people feel a degree of ownership, which is, of course, a huge asset. It also illustrates the fact the only thing Wren was no good at was acoustics, but never mind. When we started on the project to refurbish the space, there was an enormous, seemingly mahogany bar where the more modern and functional bar now sits. And I got accused of all sorts of outrages from the proposal that we replace it. There were those who believed Nelson drank there before Trafalgar, which was a massive historical impossibility. There were also those who believed that it was part of the Navy's history going back to the formation of the Naval College in 1850. So it was with considerable relief that when we took it apart, we found it was made of 1960s plywood. Anyway, that just illustrates the challenges we all face. My job here, if I can make this work. No, I can't make this work. Where do I point it? Oh, there we go. Is to launch the 2018 edition of Heritage Counts, which is multifaceted, and it consists of 5 separate elements. First of all, this year, some new research looking at heritage in commercial use, and then these 4 documents: Heritage and Society, Heritage and the Economy, the Historic Environment Overview, and Heritage Indicators. Historic England has now been leading the preparation of heritage counts since 2002, and it's become one of the main focal points for the sector to share its information and research and disseminate the vital statistics of heritage. There isn't really a close parallel anywhere else in the world. There's being work done in Europe at the moment, but I think it's incredibly valuable, and I'm grateful to everybody for participating in it because it does give us a benchmark. Over the years, Heritage Counts has helped focus the sector's attention on areas of particular concern. It has pushed forward our understanding of heritage and the wider benefits it brings to the economy, to society, and well-being more generally, and has led to the commissioning of some groundbreaking research. For example, the Heritage and Economy publication has updated the economic impact indicators for the sector for the 3rd year running. These indicators provide important estimates of the value, gross value added, of the sector and the number of jobs in the sector. Now, we acknowledge our estimates are somewhat more extensive and wider than the DCMS's own ones, and which we, in all honesty, believe seriously underestimate the impact of heritage. But we will plug away at that, and DCMS have indicated they are willing to look at not necessarily rebasing their own estimates, but providing supplementary ones, because we believe it's really important to identify and demonstrate the embedded nature of our heritage in our national life. Heritage is intrinsically linked to the construction sector, to professional services and to tourism, but actually much more significantly to social value. So the research we commissioned for this year's Heritage Counts shows us that heritage assets in commercial use are crucial for the vitality of our towns and cities. And those in this room, I'm aware I'm preaching to the converted to a large extent, but it's important to stress that heritage is not static. Preserving aspect is neither desirable nor possible, and heritage is constantly evolving to accommodate new elements alongside the older ones. This mix of traditional and the contemporary helps us to link the present with the best bits of the past. But it also sets up the country for a stronger future, where it competes successfully on the world stage as a great place to live, work and visit, as well as an economic powerhouse. Why wouldn't our heritage form a really important part of our future? It is our USP, and the alternative is fairly dreadful. A series of bland commercial developments with no character, no social engagement, delivering tiny quantities of social housing and affordable housing as a justification, which would make us indistinguishable from any other part of the world where cities have sprung up in the last 50 years. That, to me, is a massive selling short of our national value. But we've got to get that point across. And actually, as we speak, an important decision in that field is being made in Norwich about Anglia Square, where we will make sure that if the decision goes the wrong way, we will continue to fight for a good outcome for Norwich, one of our greatest historic towns. Oops. So continued use and flexible use of our commercial heritage assets forms the backbone of local economies across the country today. This is a slide of the very successful refurbishment of historic high streets in Derby, the Seeker programme before and after. And it was actually that, and taking Treasury officials to see that, that was the key to unlocking the £55 million in the budget that they have given to us and the Architectural Heritage Fund to spend on refurbishing and reviving historic high streets. So it does show the importance not just of statistics, but of real examples. So it's not only through the provision of employment and characterful premises, but also by giving new premises a unique identity that these investments are successful and capture the spirit, culture and history of neighbourhoods and individual premises. And as I said before, the social value of the historic high streets is perhaps their most important feature and contribution. If they become again places that people want to congregate in and feel comfortable in, then they will serve our nation well. So this year we found a number of businesses occupying listed buildings increased by 18% on 2012. The research estimated that nearly 150,000 businesses operate in listed buildings. The uses most likely to be found in commercial listed buildings were independent retail, independent cafes, pubs and restaurants. There are over 50,000 such independent retailers. Independent businesses are particularly important in the current retail environment, as large national retailer brands continue to face very challenging trading conditions, leading to store closures and leaving behind vast amounts of empty floor space in the centre of towns and cities. But the researchers also found that the number of independent businesses occupying listed buildings had declined since 2012, and some branded chain retailers had increased over the same period. So it is a complicated and nuanced picture. Major eating and drinking brands trading from listed buildings increased by even more than the benchmark to almost 175% and just under 5,000 listed buildings compared with 2012. Today, pub chains Green King and Marston's top the table as the largest branded retail occupiers of listed buildings. They're closely followed by large coffee chains like Cafe Nero, Starbucks and Costa. We know that nearly 9 out of 10 commercial occupiers of listed buildings are satisfied with their premises. Old buildings are not necessarily problem buildings once they're in use. The challenge is meeting any conservation deficit to bring that financially sustainable model about. So the research indicates branded retailers are increasingly using heritage assets to differentiate their brands and convey a sense of place and authenticity. And the key is to make sure that's compatible with retaining the essential character of the historic place. So as you sit with your glass in a Green King listed pub, looking at the Costas and Greggs located in old buildings across the road, is your glass half full or half empty? I suppose it may depend on whose round it is. Anyway, this is a slide of the custard factory in Birmingham. Increasing recognition by brands of the added appeal of being located in a listed building is good for investment in these properties. Most of these listed buildings will have a bright future. But is this trend of the big brands taking on listed buildings going to be at the cost of independent retailers who bring quirky, varied and genuine choice to our increasingly homogenised lives? I don't have an answer to that question, but I think that depends on individual circumstances, and it's something of which we all need to be aware. So, briefly, a few developments where Historic England has been particularly involved. And we very much welcome, as I said earlier, the announcement in the budget of this £55 million fund for high streets. I think that marks a real change for the better for our sector. Changing retail patterns have hit some historic high streets really hard. As I say, we're delighted to be working to deliver this fund for historic high streets, and the heritage element, the Future High Streets Fund, recently announced. Historic England's £40 million share of that fund over 4 years will deliver regeneration in a wide range of historic retail areas across England, with capital spend starting in 2021 and running for 4 years. We're already gearing up and working on the details of how the scheme will operate, but it will be based on our successful Heritage Action Zone model. And this slide is of our Heritage Action Zone in Sunderland. And we visited some of those buildings recently with our commissioners. I have to say, there's still a way to go once you pass the front door. But they are precious, and actually particularly precious to Sunderland. This is Lincoln. More widely, I'm pleased we're working with DCMS economists to develop a way of capturing the true value of the stock of heritage in England, known as cultural heritage capital, is based broadly on the very successful natural capital approach that has been adopted by DEFRA and the natural environment sector. It will be a long haul, but we are hoping for early progress and we'll be reporting back next year, and we'll certainly be engaging with many of you on that. It's one area where we can only make an impact if we work together as a sector with partners who've already done much work in this area, such as the National Trust, the Heritage Lottery Fund, and of course the Heritage Alliance. This is the Central Market in Norwich. It's important for us not only to gauge more and in a better way with the sector, but also to ensure that members of the public are engaged with heritage, echoing what Hilary said. At Historic England, we'll be putting together an even greater emphasis on public engagement in the future to ensure everyone better appreciates the value and importance of heritage in their lives and tells us about it. And we ask them too. We don't just tell them. Through our change programme at Historic England, we'll focus our resources more effectively to deliver the best possible protection and management of England's historic environment. We'll be moving to a 6 regional model shortly, with stronger local links for our listing and research teams. And we're going to listen more, inviting the public to participate more in our prioritisation process. I strongly feel we need to do this as a sector too. These changes are happening right now, and we'll move into our new groups, regions and working arrangements early in the new year. So, in conclusion, I'd like to thank all those people who've been involved in the production of this year's Heritage Counts, particularly those on the editorial group and from Historic England, Adala Leeson and Alex Hayes and Marwa Ahmed. Thanks are also due to John Sell as chair of the Historic Environment Forum for ensuring the sector continues to work together so productively. And finally, I would encourage you all to read Heritage Counts, and more importantly to use it. Do download the full document. There's a lot of useful information there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Duncan. Thank you very much. So lots to read and to use. And now to bring us up to date with Heritage 2020, Ben Cowell, Director General of the newly renamed Historic Houses and Deputy Chair of the Heritage Alliance. Ben.
Thank you, Loyd. Thank you, everyone. I've really only got 2 jobs to do today. The first is to thank my predecessor. I'm standing here as the new chair of Heritage 2020, but I'm taking over this coveted slot on Heritage Day from Mike Hayworth, who is here this morning, isn't it? Can you raise your hand, Mike? Thank you. There we are. And well, thank you so much, because as Loyd said earlier, it's nothing better than taking over as the chair from someone who's done the job really well, and you have definitely done that. My second task today is simply to give an update on the activities that are underway with Heritage 2020 itself. As you all know, because you've heard in previous years about the work of Heritage 2020, it is a collaborative project that brings the sector together. And in some ways, it is the epitome of what the Alliance is all about. It's grouping together the different aspects of our sector to bring about change and to do good work and address some of the big issues that we as a heritage sector face at the moment. I think that when Heritage 2020 was first dreamed up, the idea was that at that time, 2020 marked the next general election. And of course, that's now changed. Perhaps we should rename it Heritage 2022, or is it 2019, 2020? You can take your pick. But whatever is the case, in this uncertain political landscape we're in, what Heritage 2020 is doing is putting a framework around some of the big issues that our sector faces. So in some ways, it's the engine room of the heritage sector. It brings together lots of different organisations. It provides that framework where we can all speak with a common voice. So this slide is, which you won't be able to read, of course, but the idea is to convey the huge numbers of people that are involved in this. I think there are 36 different Alliance members who in some way are involved in one of the 5 working groups. So that's nearly a third of Alliance members have a stake in Heritage 2020, and that's really, really important. And what the different groups do is come together around some particularly important themes and together work on action plans for delivering some change. So there's lots of organisations, lots of people, 50 plus people involved in these different groups, over 1,000 Twitter followers these days, and so on. So lots of activity happening, and all of it reporting back to the Historic Environment Forum, and then ultimately to the Heritage Council in the way that we structure things these days. And these are the 5 working groups. I won't go through each of them, you'll be pleased to hear, but they are addressing some of the most important issues that we as a sector face today. The constructive conservation one, of course, we've been hearing about the high street investment, the investment in high street heritage. That's a massive step forward for us as a sector, and that particular group looking at the sustainable way we manage our heritage, the heritage of everyday places, is a really important group. I must mention the capacity building group. They're doing some important work, or there's some important work being done, I think, through ICINI projects, mapping local authority provision for the historic environment. And they're producing a report. They're doing excellent pro bono work for us. That report will appear very soon. And I think there's a workshop on apprenticeships that is happening next year as well. The Discovery Group is looking at how we as a sector look into research and identification, building bridges with higher education, but also with volunteer groups, with the grassroots ways of mapping what matters to people and the values of heritage up and down the country. Public engagement is addressing that really important issue of diversity, how we engage to the maximum everybody in our society with the importance of heritage. And then finally, the group that I have been involved in to date, I've been a member of the Helping Things to Happen group, which works across all those different subgroups, but tries to think of ways in which we as a sector can position ourselves to the best effect. And that's a group that is looking across the political landscape, looking across all the different opportunities that we have to impress upon other government departments the importance of heritage in delivering a whole swathe of the government's agenda and important things for society and economy today. I think that's probably all I need to say, except to implore you to get involved. It's really important that people do get involved in Heritage 2020. It's a very active group. There's a website where you can find out more about these different groups. I must at this point actually also give a shout out to Caroline Peach, who has been the most important person in Heritage 2020 in bringing us all together. And we're delighted that Caroline this year carried out a review of the activity of Heritage 2020, and indeed that led Historic England to confirm funding for 2 more years, where we're going to be exploring all these different themes and thinking about how we position ourselves as a sector going forward. So thank you to Caroline, who organises us all brilliantly. Caroline has been the driving force behind the Heritage Chat, hashtag, should I say, Heritage Chat, which is an online conversation through Twitter. And there is an event coming up just before Christmas. You don't need your Christmas radio times. What you need to know is on the 20th of December, we are having a Heritage Chat, hashtag, other way around. How can we maximise the impact of collaborative working in the historic environment sector? So look out for that. Get involved in Heritage 2020 when you can. When we come knocking, asking for evidence, please provide it, and please get involved in the different subgroups. It makes a huge difference to the work of Heritage 2020. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks for that, Ben. Now, we are going to... actually, before we do the Heritage Heroes, we're very grateful to BWB because they've provided so much support to the Alliance and also to our members. And Jamie, do you want to come up on stage and give a brief sales pitch to the wonderful advice you're going to give us all at 1 o'clock? So, Jamie, come and address us.
Thank you, Lord. Very kind. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. We're delighted to be here supporting the Heritage Alliance and its members. For those of you who have not heard of Bates Wells Braithwaite, we are a city law firm specialising in acting for public benefit organisations, which of course includes charities, social enterprises, and as we've heard this morning, what could be more for the public benefit than heritage and preserving heritage for the nation. So whether that's buildings, which are my personal passion as a real estate solicitor, or governance issues, or museum collections, we advise on the full range of issues for heritage organisations. So why am I here today? We are offering one-on-one legal advice clinic sessions at lunchtime today. So we have a number of sessions, but if you would like to have a word with us, please do come and see me in the break, or speak to Joe or Lizzie. I'm sure we can certainly fit you in. Be very happy to help you. Other aspects of where we're helping Heritage Alliance members, we have a legal issues for the heritage sector session coming up in February next year, which we are consulting with members at the moment on particular topics you would like us to cover. So again, please do come back to us with feedback and your input if there are particular issues you would like us to consider. We also have a Get Legal website for members where you have a discount as well for template legal documents. That's everything from a range of employment documents, property and governance and charity legal issues. We also have a legal advice line, so if you have a particular legal issue you wish to speak over with someone, we are available to cover that. And some of you may have seen the legal corner we provide for the Heritage Update that comes out every couple of weeks. So the most recent was covering reasonable adjustments to your buildings following the heritage debate we came to last month with you, talking about diversity, which was wonderful to hear and to come along to. So thank you for having me. We're very pleased to be supporting you all, and please do get in touch if there are any other areas that you would like support with. Many thanks.
Thanks, Jamie. Thank you very much. And we are very grateful to BWB. And what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to break for lunch a little bit before 1 o'clock so that there's more time to talk to BWB and also to have your cheese and pickle sandwiches. Right, so onwards to the Ecclesiastical Heritage Hero Awards. And of course, these awards are due very much to the generosity of our sponsor, Ecclesiastical. Could Faith come on stage, please? Thank you. Do join us. Faith Kitchen from Ecclesiastical. Now, when we present the awards in a very sort of postmodern, post-truth type of way, we're going to wait till afterwards to photograph the winners and the prize givers, because this is a very narrow stage. So we will do photographs afterwards. The Heritage Heroes Awards recognize very much the contribution of volunteers to our sector, because as a financially under-resourced and practically overstretched sector, we rely hugely on volunteers, from boards of trustees to staff to tour guides to conservators, etc., etc., etc. We really couldn't do the huge amount of work we do without volunteers. So even though we are financially poor, we are extraordinarily rich in human capital, and we really like honoring our volunteers. We only regret that we cannot honor all of them. So, just to give you an idea of the variety of entrants we had, because we had an extraordinarily strong field of contenders for the awards this year, I just want to mention the shortlisted entries. So we have Alan Wynne from Friends of Brooklands. Can we see a picture? Do we have a nice picture of that anywhere? Yes, there we are. Brian Pierce from the Rail World Museum. Michael Constable of St. Andrew's Church, and community support of East Leach. Some of our very worthy shortlisted entrants. And now, before I announce the two winners, I just want to very gratefully thank Henry Cleary, who is one of the Heritage Alliance trustees, who has taken Heritage Heroes under his wing and has put in an enormous amount of work to make these happen. So, Henry, thank you very much indeed. We're very grateful. So now we come to the first of our two awards. The Ecclesiastical Heritage Hero Award for 2018 goes to someone who is a very distinguished musician, leader of the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment, and senior professor at both Cambridge and the Royal Academy of Music. And in addition to those are two full-time jobs. And in addition to doing that, has been the lead volunteer at All Saints Church, Alton Priors, a great 2-star listed church. And that person is Maggie Faultless. As organizer of the Music for a While classical music concerts, she's been able to attract internationally famous musicians and raise tens of thousands of pounds for the church's Conservation Trust. In 2015, when half of the lead roof from her church was stolen, Maggie jumped in to save the day, rallying the community around the church to raise over £8,000 to pay for an innovative rubberoid roof membrane. This will now keep the church watertight whilst they seek further funds for more permanent repairs to take place. Maggie is unable to join us today, and she's sorry that she can't. She sent a message. It's been an enormous pleasure to support All Saints Alton Priors over the last 25 years, fundraising and bringing internationally famous musicians from all over the world to perform concerts each year. Thanks to support from the Cecil King Memorial Foundation, we've been able to give all ticket proceeds to the church via the church's Conservation Trust, who look after the church. I'm happy to accept this award on behalf of everyone who gives their time to make the events at Alton Priors possible. And now we're going to have a short video.
My name's Maggie Faultless. I'm a local resident of the neighbouring village Alton Barnes, and we're standing outside All Saints Alton Priors. I think you can probably see there's a large tree in the background, which is a 1700-year-old yew tree that sits in the churchyard. It's very special, and its juxtaposition with the church is absolutely glorious. It's extraordinary to find a building that's still in use, that has, as it were, its original Saxon, Norman, medieval charm about it. I think the absence of heating and electricity is rather key to that, because the church is, as it were, exposed to time and the elements, and that seems to sit very happily into its surroundings, surrounded by Neolithic sites, burial grounds, all sorts of other examples of very ancient life around us. And it does have a wow factor for that reason. A lot of people come here and find incredible peace and quiet. I first became involved in the CCT because I came to live in the village in 1994, and the church was an immediate recognisable highlight of the local landscape. And it was clear that the church needed supporters, needed volunteers. I'm a musician, and the obvious thing to do was to bring music to this church. And over the last quarter of a century, we've held concerts here every single year since 1996. We now have a very large mailing list. People come from all over the country to hear the concerts. Performers come from all over the world to perform. And over the course of the years, we've raised really quite a lot of money for the church, and there's been this annual summer festival where volunteers from local villages have also helped me manage, put on and run the festival, and it's been a complete joy and continues to be a complete joy. Like several other churches around the country, very sadly, the lead from half of the roof of the church disappeared overnight without any of us noticing. I put out an SOS call to the whole Music for a While membership and our own sponsors, the Cecil King Memorial Foundation, without whom none of this would be possible. So I would like to say thank you to them too at this point. And we raised enough money to replace the stolen lead with a rubberoid roof and an alarm system. It's only a temporary solution, but I'm incredibly grateful to the many, many supporters, 200 or so, who funded this. I'd like to say thank you very much to the Heritage Alliance for giving me this award, but I accept it only on behalf of the other volunteers at All Saints Alton Priors, to the musicians and audience for Music for a While, to our own sponsors, the Cecil King Memorial Foundation, and I hope that the Alliance can provoke and promote conversations within the industry to raise the profile of the needs to look after churches like All Saints and so many other historic buildings across the UK. I'm very sorry not to be here in person to receive the award, but I'm delighted that two other volunteers from the neighbourhood, Charles and Sue Rice, are able to accept the award on my behalf. Thank you very much indeed.
And many thanks to Blair Chadwick from the Church's Conservation Trust for making that video. As we started doing last year, we have these splendid awards. We have cheerfully denuded the Palace of Westminster of a number of Victorian and caustic floor tiles. And it's a very suitable heritage award. So could Charles and Sue, you know something, I've totally changed plans. Faith and I are going to come down onto the floor, and Charles and Sue will give you the award there, and then we can take the photo at the same time, right? Congratulations, congratulations. Faith, would you like to present them? Thank you very much. Congratulations. Right. Well, that seemed to work, didn't it? Yeah, good. Right. Now we are coming to an award that we decided to create for the first time last year to recognize exceptional service over an extended period of time, and that is the Ecclesiastical Heritage Hero Lifetime Award. And by the way, whoever receives this, it's not a message that you can now stop doing it. Yeah, so you have to keep on doing it. In this year's award, we recognize someone who's been a prime motivator for many historic building rescue projects throughout the UK. Very many building preservation trusts would not have got off the ground were it not for her passion for our built heritage, her extraordinary enthusiasm, and her practical encouragement. For 29 years, Maria Perks has been at the center of the network of first the Association of Building Preservation Trusts and then the Heritage Trust Network. In addition to her day job with the Architectural Heritage Fund, she has spent her spare time helping a team of volunteers to develop a national network. She's brought energy, skill, enthusiasm, personal encouragement, and a wonderful memory for people and their projects, as well as her skills on the piano, which sadly we can't hear today, to raise spirits at the end of a hard working day. So our Ecclesiastical Heritage Hero Award 2018 Lifetime Achievement goes to Maria Perks of the Heritage Trust Network, and we're going to see a little video.
Quite often one sees buildings behind hoardings and people say, when are they going to do something about it? And who is they? Well, often the they becomes groups of local people who get together and decide for themselves that they want to do something about it. And my job and my career really has been helping those people, giving them advice and putting them in touch, more importantly, with other people who've already done it, so that these things can continue in perpetuity. I have one particular heritage hero who's no longer with us, who was an extraordinary woman called Hilary. She is a heritage hero to me and to many others, I'm sure. And she was the one who had a little bit of faith in me back in 1989 and spotted something in me. I've had a number of roles, really. I mean, I set off with the Architectural Heritage Fund. I was development officer and then projects development manager, and that was a great job, and I really enjoyed that, and that's where I learned the most. But running alongside that for the first few years was the secretaryship of the Association of Preservation Trust. Probably one of my favourite bits of the job, really. I really, really loved that. And I would travel all over the country, meeting people, area meetings, running seminars and conferences, and we had some good times doing that. I'm very inspired by the projects that I see and have seen completed, but I'm far more inspired by the people that I've met, the armies of volunteers across the country, and the people who I hope I've helped along the way. It's all about people, this business. It's getting people to work together to get the right kind of advice, to find the right uses for the right buildings. And there's craft skills training. Some of the projects create homes, places for people to work. There might be arts uses. I mean, any number of uses of these buildings. And that's just inspiring to see what people can achieve from nothing and from knowing nothing often and getting together. And Heritage Trust Network is there to help in that process. Get in touch with Heritage Trust Network straight away, because they can help you before you set up and advise you on setting up the right kind of charity. Engage with your community, engage and forge partnerships with planning authorities, funders, people who can help you. Gather people around you who are bright, committed, enthusiastic, and you need people who know about business, who have a bit of courage, who are prepared to take a little bit of a risk, calculated risk, and the Heritage Trust Network is just there to help them along and give them advice.
And before we present the award, I'd like to thank the 4 students from the Royal Holloway Media Studies course, Julia, Margarita, Alana, and Katie, who made the video. And unlike most students, who spend days watching the Kardashians, they're actually at a lecture today, and they can't join us, but we're very grateful to them. And Maria, would you come forward so that we can present the award? Congratulations. Faith, would you like to do it? Would you like to? Yes, please. Come and talk to us. You've made notes. That's marvelous. More than I've done. Yeah, please.
Crikey. I remember this organisation before Heritage Link was even thought about. Does anyone remember catalytic conversion, that document, in response to Lord Rogers and all that kind of thing? And it was who's going to sign up to this process, and there was a lot of argument with the Joint Committee, and Heritage Link kind of came from that. I just wanted to say thank you. I wanted to say thank you to my family and friends for never telling me how wonky my glasses are. This is very humbling and rather extraordinary for me, and I share with Michelle Obama I have acute imposter syndrome. I had it 29 years ago when Lady Weir, Hilary, my great mentor in life, phoned me up as I was driving down Broad Street in Birmingham and said, "We'd like to offer you the job." And I got scared from that moment on. I suffered from chronic imposter syndrome from then onwards, and then when I got the phone call about this award, I got a bit of an acute attack. Hey-ho. I have to say thank you. It's been an incredible journey. Architectural Heritage Fund, Association of Preservation Trusts, leading on to Heritage Trust Network. I dabbled with the Prince's Regeneration Trust. His Royal Highness is one of my heritage heroes, alongside Hilary Weir, who I mentioned. And I would also like to mention my great pal, Malcolm Crowder, who I'm sure some of you know, Liz Davidson, Neil Rind, Anne McIntosh, and many, many more. I have heritage heroes of my own. But the real ones, of course, are the Building Preservation Trusts and the volunteers. Armies and armies of volunteers everywhere, sitting around kitchen tables on Tuesday nights in the rain, wondering how they're going to sort out the church roof. Hats off to them. I just wanted as well a word for your sponsor, Ecclesiastical. I remember, however many years ago it was, I used to get phone calls regularly about how can I get any insurance for my building at risk. And in fact, it was Ecclesiastical that was one of the very few that went anywhere near buildings that were standing empty, unknown owners, etc. So on behalf of the sector, thank you. And I also wanted to thank the film crew, who we had a great day in Southwold, and a little plug for the sailors' reading room that I was sitting in during that film. Nautical, come to Southwold, sit in the sailor reading room, run by a small charity that looks after the building and the heritage within. And thank you, Heritage Trust Network. It's a star organisation alongside this one. And I'd quite like to dedicate this to my dad, who would have been so, so proud of me. And he's not here, so bless him. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Loyd, I need to say something.
Oh, right.
Well, many congratulations to Maria and Maggie for your awards. I'm afraid I'm butting in a sort of unscripted moment because we couldn't leave the Heritage Heroes session this year without making an extra special Heritage Heroes Award to the man for whom the term could almost have been invented. As you heard earlier, Loyd steps down after 9 years as chairman of the Alliance. And he came to us with a pedigree of heritage organisations to his name. Rather than go through the long list of organisations, it may be easier, in fact, to list the ones Loyd hasn't been involved in over the years. But the important thing is the man, Loyd himself, who you would have seen from the standing ovation earlier, is much loved by us all, has been the most amazing advocate for our work. He has opened doors that others cannot open. He's brought sparkle, energy, zest and passion to the work of lobbying for and being an advocate for heritage. And we are so delighted he spent 9 years with us. And we couldn't let the occasion go without marking that with your own Heritage Heroes Award. So although we've prolonged the lunch break even further, can I invite Lizzie on stage to award you, Loyd, with your own Heritage Heroes Award.
Thank you very much. That's great, thank you.
Photo, in the photo.
Thank you very much. That's a surprise. Thank you. I'm very grateful. I'm very touched and very grateful. And it's been fun. Well, it's still fun because Peter hasn't been elected yet. Right. Well, thank you all very much indeed. Once again, many, many thanks to Ecclesiastical for your support in the past, in the present, and should we make a note of in the future. We're going to break for lunch now. We're 10 minutes ahead of schedule, which will give people more time to get lots of wonderful free advice from BWB. And please be back in your seats at exactly 10 minutes past 2. So thank you all very much indeed, and enjoy lunch. Thank you.